Why do we want to spend our time studying Buddhism? Because the Buddha jewels can help us to turn what we learn into true happiness. So that's why we want to invest a little bit of time here to talk about the Buddha jewels. By looking at Buddhism from a fresh perspective, and perhaps rethink of our attitude towards spiritual life. Because the aim of Buddhism is to attain enlightenment. And it is a state of moral and spiritual perfection. And the ideal calls for exercise of heroic qualities on the moral and spiritual plane. So this kind of spiritual ideal requires heroism in the highest degree. So Siddhartha was known after attaining enlightenment with many titles, one of which is the compassionate one. He was also known as Mahavira, V-I-R-A, which means great hero. Maha means great, Vira means hero. So he was also known as great hero. He was also known as JINA, J-I-N-A, which is an Indian word for conqueror. Well, he conquered the whole world of conditioned existence within himself. In the Dhammapada, a very old Buddhist text capturing the words, the verses that the Buddha uttered. In the Dhammapada, there's one story at the end. He says, a person may conquer 1,000 men 1,000 times, but if he can conquer himself, then that is more glorious victory. It is so difficult to conquer ourselves, our craving, our desires, our shortfalls. It's easier to blame on other people, right, to try to change people, but it is so difficult to change ourselves. But if we can change ourselves, then that victory is more glorious than trying to change other people. He was victorious over the triple world because the worldly pleasures could not grab hold of him. The Buddha categorized this whole existence, this world, into 3 realms. The realms of desire, the realms of form, and the realms of formlessness. In the realms of desires, that we existence covers from the lowest, from hell up to heaven. And they all have 5 things in common. And those are the 5 desires. Desire for wealth, for sex, fame, food and drinks, and rest. In this world, having political, economic power, properties, intelligence makes a person feel great. And so that's the realm of desire. We exist for those 5 desires. But if we want to transcend that realm of desire, we have to practice meditation, where we are gravitated towards meditative bliss. So the realms of form, they survive on meditation, meditative spiritual bliss. And same for formlessness, even greater bliss. So by virtue of the Buddha's conquest, that the Buddha becomes, of course, the king. He's able to subdue all the realms of the conditioned existence. And so he is called a Dhammaraja, R-A-J-A, Dhammaraja, meaning the king of the law. Dhamma is the law of truth, and Raja is king. So he becomes known as king of the truth or the law. In Buddhist art, often portrays the Buddha as a king, bearing insignia of royalty. These insignias are very curious to Westerners. In the United States, we don't have kings. In Britain, the corresponding insignia are the orbs, like the golden ball and the scepter. Those are symbols of reigning monarch's authority. Those who hold these items here hold authority and power over the country, its people. But in India, well, they use umbrella. In the Buddhist art, you see covers over the Buddha's head and a fly whisk. But in India, during the Buddha's time, ordinary people never used umbrellas. They would use a big leaf to cover themselves. Real umbrellas were reserved for royalty and the noble. But normal people didn't use real umbrella to cover themselves. Back then, the elder of the tribe or his country would sit under a tree with his back against the trunk of the tree, would preside over matters, settle disputes. And over time, with the tree behind him and the cover of the leaves, the branches, that became a symbol of authority. So that's why in Buddhist art you see the cover signifies authority, signifies nobility and authority and kingship. Over time, through art using the cover as a symbol of authority and social position. And in Buddhist art often use a symbolic umbrella or a cosmic tree which overshadows the world of existence. The fly bush is more straightforward or simple. It's made from the tail of a yak. A yak is like an ox animal with long horns, and it has very beautiful tails, a white tail. The Buddha is depicted with umbrella over him, with gods flanking him, all around them holding flight wrists. These symbols here show that the Buddha is the king of the Dhamma, or the king, if you will, of the spiritual universe. The Buddha, being the king, and his great disciple, Saripatra, is the commander-in-chief. No, this is not the Salvation Army. The royal symbolism, such as the military terminology, is not unconnected with the Buddha's social background. The Buddha came from the Kshatriya caste, which is the caste of the warrior. We know that Siddhartha, the prince, was brought up, educated purely and simply as a warrior. He was trained for his whole life. When he was to marry YASODHARA, some of her kinsmen objected that he was not good enough of a fighter. So he had to prove himself by, of course, defeating them. Clearly, as a nobleman, it was not enough to be a warrior, but he was required to be an exceptional fighter, exceptional warrior, a hero. So the Buddha never went to battle, but the incident of marrying YASODHARA was kind of interesting because we had a glimpse of how heroic the Buddha was. Without that event, we wouldn't have known. His whole life, his events that happened in his life, attracted all types of people. People who were motivated about self-empowerment and physical power, martial arts. They had those events to entice them to learn Buddhism. So the event of the marriage with YASODHARA was really a learning lesson for us. Without that event, we would not have known how great the Buddha was. You have to appreciate this. The Buddha came into a tradition thousands of years with this caste system in place. Right? The Brahmas being the top, they consider themselves to be top, and the untouchables. You cannot commingle different castes. The Buddha came in and wiped it all out without any difficulty. One, he opened his Sangha, spiritual community, to people from all castes could join. And he even dared to challenge a thousands of years tradition to open the community to women. Women back then had no position in society. They were treated like property. They had no opportunities to make contributions to society. The Buddha came in and abolished all that. So we talk about civil rights movement back in the 60s or the 20s. Ladies and gentlemen, social justice started 3,000 years ago when the Buddha opened up his Sangha to people of all castes and women without any bloodshed. And the king bowed down to the Buddha. Right? At that time, anybody who challenged imperial authority or royalty, they would be punished. But the Buddha single-handedly stood up to social injustice without any kind of bloodshed and with fearlessness. That is incredible. I just couldn't wrap my mind around it because anybody who would challenge any kind of social authority, and if you look at the dark history of the United States, where people were fighting for their civil rights, they were lynched, they were hung, they were killed, they were chased after like dogs. And people lived in fear. But the Buddha was so confident, was so compassionate, was so strong mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. He stood up to all kind of social pressure to keep that caste because the Brahmins, although they taught equality, but they did not truly believe in it because they want to maintain that caste system for their own benefits. So it was a two-phase system, if you will. But the Buddha abolished all that, and he lived what he taught. When the Buddha left this world, he entered nirvana. He was so confident of his own teachings that he didn't establish any kind of organization to carry on Buddhism. He was so confident that the principles that he discovered would carry themselves. People would be able to understand, would study, and be united spiritually. Unlike some organization where they establish organizational structure to maintain that authority. But when the Buddha left, he did not say, okay, you this disciple, you are now the chief, you the secretary, you do this, you do that, okay, so I'm going to leave. But he left, and Buddhism was autonomous, was able to operate for thousands of years without any kind of central authority. That is amazing. It's operating in harmony without any kind of central authority because the principles are so strong. They are really the truth, the test of time, and they are still true today. And not only locally, but globally. When we study Buddhism, we will find ourselves on the right path.